I'm Elizabeth Thomas, and I'm at this iconic Kerala Museum, Edapalli. And what you just heard is the Vanji Bhumi, or the national anthem of the former kingdom of Travancore. This book, The Shrouded Sceptre, is presenting to you the history of this kingdom in and around those years preceding its absorption into the state of Kerala as India got its independence. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my privilege to highlight the special aspects of this book in an informal conversation with Thomas Chacko, the author of The Shrouded Sceptre. So first off, the caption or title is meant or intended to capture the sense of what follows. So why did you decide to call it The Shrouded Sceptre?
I started out writing a book about the Travancore National and Quilon Bank and its dramatic collapse. But when I researched into it, I realized that the man responsible for the downfall of the bank was Sir CP Ramaswami Aiyar, who actually wielded the scepter in Travancore. First as constitutional advisor to the young Maharaja, and then later as the Dewan. While he was constitutional advisor, he used to often overrule the Dewan. That was the kind of control he had. And he ran the state, literally it was his domain. The Maharaja was unassuming and a quiet person who was more interested in the Padmanabha Swami temple than in administering the revenue. So it was Sir CP Ramaswamy who actually wielded the scepter, but it was shrouded, because he was not officially the ruler.
So in other words, you say he was the power behind the throne. And I think in your book, you bring out the history and the social movements, the life in the former kingdom of Travancore, but with the bank, the Travancore and Quilon Bank as the focal point, and its collapse is the matter. It's through the collapse of the bank that you bring out all of this. So in fact, I'd like to quote from something you've written in the prologue of the book, and I think it resonates more than ever today. I quote, "It was difficult to digest that even 80 years ago there was a government that was so corrupt that it could get the highest court in the land to ruin a bank. What set you on this quest to set the record straight, and to seek the truth? Because as a librarian who facilitates research, I do feel one needs to get to the bottom of things. The truth needs to be told. So you felt you had a story there to tell."
Yes. My father, the whole book was inspired actually by my father, who joined the Travancore National Bank soon after he finished his studies at St. Joseph's Trichy. So he worked in Madras with the Travancore National Bank, and then of course with the merged Travancore National and Quilon Bank. And Appa always maintained that the bank was a very well-run organization and that its directors were honorable men. And he insisted that it was Sir C.P. Ramaswamy who was behind the collapse of the bank. Now, I wondered, what did C.P. Ramaswamy gain out of the bank's collapse? I mean, it should have been a feather in his cap,
Exactly.
because to have the fourth largest bank in all of British India, to be in his realm, would have been definitely something he should have been proud of. But instead, he actively saw to it that the bank is finished off once and for all. Then I wondered, and from my research I realized that someone had benefited tremendously financially. Because, to give you 2-3 examples, I'll give you one example. The Quilon Bank headquarters, even today, iconic building in Quilon. And the property was brought in 1919, just after the end of World War I. And the CP who founded the Government Bank, didn't build on it for a long time. It was only in 1934-35 that he built the building at a cost of ₹1,40,000. So you're talking about 19,000 rupees he bought the property, plus ₹1,40,000 he spent on it. So well over ₹1,50,000. But it was sold in 1940 to a crony of Sir CP Ramaswami for 15,000 rupees, a pittance, considering it is not even the cost of the land purchased 21 years before. So that was one example. And see, even in the court proceedings, it was so regular that although there were many reasons for involving Sir C.P. Ramaswamy, the court would not allow his name to be even mentioned in the court proceedings, and they told the defense lawyers.
So you mean that was a definite directive?
There was definitely a directive. The CP did not want to be involved in it. And the judge told the defense lawyers that if you mention Sir C.P. Ramaswamy's name in this court, I will treat it as contempt of court. So all this was done, but one thing I'd like to point out. In spite of all, so many buildings and properties having been sold at throwaway prices, the bank was eventually able to settle with its depositors in Ceylon, where it had 4 branches, rupee for rupee, and to its depositors in its 76 branches in India, 14 annas. That, if all these properties were still there, they would have been able to give them back many more.
So that's very commendable. And I'm sure you figured now from this talk that, Thomas Chacko is a very experienced company secretary, and his head for facts and figures makes him perfectly placed to research such a scenario. And but before you immediately switch off thinking it's all dry facts and figures, let me tell you, this is a very well-researched, authentic account. But it reads like a novel, and it has its shares of heroes and villains, twists and turns in the plot. So, my next question to you is about this unusual structure of the book. It has 25 narrators, and I felt it is rather unique in a book of non-fiction. We see it often in fiction, but not in non-fiction. And I felt it really gave me a 360-degree perspective, where the voices of the victims and the vanquished are also heard, and not just the victor's version, which is what history often becomes. Right? So tell us about that.
Well, as I mentioned, I started out to write a book about the collapse of the Travancore National Bank. But then I realized that the fulcrum around which the whole story was Sir C.P. Ramaswamy. So I decided there was an assassination attempt on Sir C.P. CP Ramaswami on 25th July 1947. He survived that, but previous wounds, but he survived. So I decided to use that as for people to reflect on this period during which he was Lord and Master of Travancore. So I have had people responding 25th July, 26th July, 29th July, and 30th. 30th was Lady Whittington, who was in England. So I thought if she would know about it immediately, to take her a few days to get to know about it. So I used 30th. And through these voices, I tried to capture the whole story of the bank and Travancore. And out of the 25 narrators, 16 narrations have been vetted either by the author, not the author, I mean the narrator, or by their families. 3, there are nobody left. People like Lady Whittington and Quilon. Nobody left who I could
be approached for that. Yeah.
So, and the remaining 6 are largely from the royal family of Travancore, and everything I've stated is from the public domain. Now, the whole structure is, of these narrations are interwoven through a conversation between Sir CP Ramaswami Aiyar and Dr. Radhakrishnan, who was then Vice President. It takes place in 1960.
He became president later.
He became president in 1962, I think. Dr. Radhakrishnan's statements are all taken from his writings. And Sir CP Ramaswamy only defends whatever he did in the conversation. So I've given him an opportunity to defend his actions. While most of the narrators naturally accuse him of very wrongdoings.
So essentially you try to balance the narrative. You've given this side to where he is given a chance to justify or defend himself. And okay, now coming to your other books. Your first book, Without a City Wall, was a novel. The second one, Atop the World, was a travelogue. And so was your next one, On the Road. On the Road Again. So it's pretty obvious that your passions are travel, writing. And it's in this book that, and also I must mention this, he loves driving vehicles of all kinds, all over the place. And so it's in this book that perhaps your professional experience has come into play. So tell us about how that helped you research this, and what are your conclusions on these actual financial transactions? What do you feel about the bank and what happened to it?
So, I'm a qualified company secretary, and I've had more than 40 years of experience in this field. So many things sprang out at me from readings I did about the bank, particularly its accounts. The prosecution, they were attacking the fact that the bank had not provided adequate amount for its bad and doubtful debts, which is actually a bit ridiculous, because there's no one can really say this is the exact figure of. It's never, as a company secretary, I know that's never done. Secondly, in the court, the district judge estimated it to be 8.5 lakhs. Justice Aiyar of the Travancore High Court estimated it at 5 lakhs. So even in the court. But the best part of it was that the auditor who had certified that was not examined. He was available but not examined. I mean, how can you come to any conclusion without examining the auditor.
So obviously code procedures, standard procedures were not followed.
Not followed. And the auditors were not, even the debtors, not even one was followed. You know, it's bad and doubtful debts. It's not like bad debts only. It's doubtful debts. So question of the debtor also was available. There were, not all, but quite a few of the debtors were available. They were all in Travancore.
And none of them were called.
And so the thing is, and for something like that, which is a figure in the balance sheet, which was certified by the statutory auditors. So, at best it could be said that the auditors overlooked it. So it is but the directors, 4 directors and the company secretary of the bank was sentenced to 8 years rigorous imprisonment. I mean, this is a white collar crime. Nobody is sentenced to rigorous imprisonment for white collar crimes, if at all it is a crime. So, definitely, I mean, that was the thing that stood up.
So, in a nutshell, you feel that the case was not secured by standard procedure. The convictions were, resulted very harsh. Resulted in a sentence that was not in keeping with the severity of the crime, which was not even proved in a sense.
Not only that, CP Martin, who was the managing director of the bank, refused to even ask for a pardon. But he was released 39 months after he was sentenced to imprisonment. He served 39 months, he was in prison, but he was released without even any admission or even a request for a pardon. So what does that tell you? And you must remember that Sir CP Ramaswami was in his time considered the most brilliant lawyer in India. So if he couldn't prove,
obviously there was nothing there. So there you have the conclusion that Thomas Chacko reached after extensive research on the topic of the dramatic collapse of this Travancore and Quilon bank. And I think it's time now to do a bit of book tasting with some tidbits from the book read out by different people. The first excerpt is read by Chacko, an experienced English and history teacher, and it's about the vengeful Satyagraha, a fight for permission for the lower castes to enter temples and to use all the roads, I repeat, all the roads, even those near the temples, freely by the lower castes.
Maharaja Sri Aiyar had, as far back as 1865, decreed all public roads in Travancore open to people of all castes. That notification was reaffirmed by the Government of Travancore in 1884. However, when it came up for a judicial overview, the High Court ruled that public roads covered by government notification were the King's Highways or Rajavedikal, not the village roads or Gramavedikal. The roads around the Vaikam temple were Gramavedikal, and therefore, even decades after the notification opening all public roads to everyone, the lower castes were barred from even walking on those roads. What was ridiculous was that this ban did not apply to non-Hindus and, of course, animals. The rules were so crazy that Alumutu Channar and Irava, the second person in Travancore to own a car, the Maharaja being the first, could only get a Naya to drive his car, a Chevrolet. The irony was that, in accordance with permitted protocol, Channar could not sit alongside his driver on the front seat, even if he wanted to. What was even stranger was that Charnar had to address his employee respectfully while the driver called his employer Eda, a term used when addressing younger siblings or social inferiors. More bizarre was a rule that when Charnar's car came near the temple, he had to get out of his car, cross fields, and walk through by-lanes until he was beyond the temple. His Nayan driver could drive the Chevrolet past the temple to a point where his employer could enter his own car.
In a society that was rigidly stratified by caste, there were several vicious repressive practices like Tindal. Aditi Nair, director of Kerala Museum, Malayala Manorama Foundation, Edapalli, reads a passage that gives you an idea of the practice of Tindal through the eyes and ears of Dakshayani Velayudan. She was the first woman graduate of the scheduled caste from India. She was also a member of the Constituent Assembly.
The vicious codes of discrimination imposed on the Pulayans through Tindal were so stringent that whenever members of the community went out, they had to make their presence felt by uttering a peculiar cry every 4 or 5 paces. If answered by someone belonging to what was perceived as a superior caste, the Pulayan had to turn back. The system was so awful and diabolical that an upper caste person could punish a man or woman from the lower caste with death for not keeping to the prescribed distance mandated by Tindal. Dakshayani knew the story of a young woman named Nangeli, who in the early 1900s had fought against the infamous Mulakkaram or breast tax, a tax which was imposed to maintain the caste structure and the social customs on clothing. Nangeli was an Irava from a village near Chertala, and she refused to go about bare-breasted. When the tax inspector heard about it, he went to her house to demand that she pay the breast tax. She refused to pay and then cut off her breasts in protest. Nangeli died of excessive blood loss, and her distraught husband committed suicide by jumping into her funeral pyre. Fortunately, the couple had no children. Nangeli's act, however, served to benefit all the women of Travancore because the Maharaja eventually rolled back that reprehensible breast tax.
The next reading is by Abraham Chacko, former Executive Director of Federal Bank, and Philip Mohan, a Chartered Accountant, and it takes the form of a conversation between Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, our first Vice President who became President later, and Sir CP Ramaswami Aiyar. In this, it becomes amply clear that the conviction and the downfall of the bank was not achieved through standard procedure, and that even the auditors of the bank had not been examined in court.
Yes, and change has its enemies, CP.
Mine were the owners of that bank.
Were they really guilty of the wrongdoing they were accused of?
They were guilty. The court decreed it so.
I was told that Sir V.M. Mittal, the former Advocate General of India, opined that the managing director's conviction was not secured by decent standards.
It was only an opinion, rather, and one that was politically charged.
Apparently, Sir Mittal went on record to state that Martha's conviction was based on inadequate evidence and speculation.
It was, as I said, only an opinion. Martha was found guilty by the court.
Mittal went on to further opine that Martha's conviction was illegal.
No, it was not.
According to him, the statutory auditors were not examined as they should have been.
I did not direct the prosecution.
Was the Viceroy satisfied?
I told Lord Lilithgrove that Martin and his partner were strong supporters of the Congress Party.
What was his reaction to that?
He seemed satisfied with what I told him.
And then was that the end of the matter?
I thought that the issue would end there. The other directors requested Maharaja to pardon them, so they were released earlier and then went back to look after what was left of their other businesses.
What about Martin?
He refused to request the Maharaja for a pardon.
Did that become a problem?
Martin remained behind bars and became a talking point in Travancore, and the Congress protests were growing.
The others had been released, so you could have set him free without losing face.
I could not have done that.
Why not? Did you have any specific problem with C.P. Martin?
He was an arrogant fellow. In 1934, I asked him to try and ensure that the Viceroy's visit to Travancore went well, and he agreed. He did help, and the visit went off without a hitch. However, Martin expected quite a bit for his help, and when he realized he was not going to get it, he went to the extent of issuing a statement to the press, accusing me of having read all promises I had made. Imagine the gall of the fellow. He went to the press with it.
For the final reading, we have Thomas Chacko, the author himself, and he reads out from an opinion given by Sir V.M. Litter, the former Advocate General, and it's about the case against the bank, the Travancore and Quilon Bank, in which it becomes very clear, and he states categorically, that the harsh punishment meted out to the directors of the bank was not in keeping with the severity of the alleged crime, and neither did we have the evidence to prove it.
On a criminal charge, the duty of the prosecution is to bring all available evidence before the court. But this trial appears to be distinguished not by the evidence adduced, but by the evidence withheld. A respectable firm of auditors audited the accounts and certified the balance sheet. It may be presumed that before giving their certificate, they made all necessary inquiries about bad and doubtful debts. As the prosecution sought to make out a much larger sum, one should have expected that the auditor would be examined, but he was not examined, and there is no explanation for his absence. Again, there was no suggestion that the borrowers whose debts were alleged to be bad were not available. None were examined. The agents of the branches who gave the advances were not examined. Thus, the prosecution chose to withhold the most helpful evidence and rely upon speculation on book entries. An examination of book entries, even by expert accountants, is of little use to establish criminal liability of directors for not showing a debt as bad or doubtful. What was done in this case was that certain items were picked out from the bank books and were examined from the point of view of the length of time during which they were pending, of their being secured or unsecured, of attempts made for their recovery, etc. And after a laborious process of strained deductions, debts were classified as good, bad, or doubtful, according to the conception of the judge or the expert witness concerned. Hence is the discrepancy mentioned above. The obvious course of personal inquiry, which it had been the business of the agents and auditors to make, was not adopted. In my opinion, the scrutiny of debts as made by the High Court was exploratory and speculative, and the result entirely unreliable. It was amazing how the court lightly ignored the warning which some of the expert prosecution witnesses gave.
So, after reading your book and hearing everybody, I was reminded of a question I had put to my mom when I was a young child. I grew up in Chennai, near Albapet, very close to CP Ramaswami Aiyar Road. I asked her, Mom, why was this man so famous that he had this huge road, important road named after him? And my normally mild-mannered mom got visibly angry. Her reaction startled me, and so I did not pursue the subject further. You know what she said? She said, he was not famous, he was infamous. And years later, I asked her about it, and she told me various accounts that she had heard while she schooled in Tiruvallur when it was the old kingdom, and where her uncle, Dr. Talib, was the court physician. And it struck me that young as she was, those vindictive Machiavellian actions of CP, as they called him, really touched a raw nerve. But enough of my reminiscing. I think we should go on to the questions and face the barrage of questions that your audience must have for you. Thomas Chacko, over to you.
Thank you.
What were the historical sources you used for the book? And was it difficult to access them?
It would have been rather difficult, say 20 years ago. But today there are ever so many books about Travancore and Sir CP Ramaswami Aiyar and others who feature in this my book. So it's not a problem. I have acknowledged as many as 44 books in my bibliography. Thanks to the Kerala Council for Historical Research, I was able to access a digital version of the 11 volumes of Eliama Martin's diary. That helped me a great deal because I could find out a lot of things about the period, particularly when her husband and others were in jail. Then Manu Pillai's The Ivory Throne also helped a great deal because it gave me a lot of information about the royal family of Travancore. So, yes, it was not so difficult to get the information.
Since the TNQ Bank was so successful, it's curious that the Dewan of Travancore would choose to undermine the bank. Why? Was it a personal slight he suffered? Was it a bias against some community, or what? This question goes to the heart of the subject in this book.
I have not been able to find anything in my research to show that Sir CP was against the Syrian Christian community. He did have a grudge against CP Martin, who was the founder of the Quilon Bank, but that could not have been the reason for him pulling down such a great bank, even before it had even completed 1 year of operations. However, someone made a lot of money through the sale of assets at throwaway prices, assets belonging to the Travancore National Quilon Bank. These were all sold to cronies of Sir CP Ramaswami. As I mentioned earlier, the very impressive headquarters of the Quilon Bank which was bought in 1919 for 19,000 rupees. And in 1934-35, CP Martin had spent 1,40,000 on building that beautiful headquarters. This was sold in 1938 well before World War II, to a crony of Sir CP Ramaswamy for a mere 15,000 rupees. Many other properties of the bank were sold at such abysmally low prices. Now, when you find who actually benefited from that, you will know the answer to the question, why did he pull down this bank? This being a Zoom release, I'm not having any person to formally release the book, but here is the book, The Shrouded Sceptre, and its inside pages are like this, and the tail end is like that. This will be a first edition of 500 copies. Thereafter, I will bring it out as a paperback. Thank you.
I'm prepared to answer any more questions.
I would like to make a couple of comments.
Yes.
I am the grandson of K.C. Eapen, Vice Chairman of the bank, a younger brother of K.C. Maman Maple, and the only person who actually died. They were all put in together in Pujapura jail, and unfortunately my grandfather passed away in the bank. So we were the worst off in every respect. I have, of course, faint memories. Being born in 1943, I was 4 years old. My father was doing his PhD in England, so I happened to be in Travancore, in Kerala, when there was this assassination bid on Sir CP. He escaped the bid. It was actually by one Mr. Mani Aiyar of Ambalapura, but everyone was suspected.
Yes.
And my mother's brother, who was a freedom fighter, his name is K.E. Maman. He passed away recently. He was targeted. And I was 4 years old when the police came and picked him up from the house, took him to jail. Fortunately, CP was so intimidated by the attempt on him. He was a coward, basically. He surrounded himself with the paraphernalia of office. In fact,
all bullies are cowards.
Beg your pardon?
All bullies are cowards.
Yeah, they are. You may have an idea of how he got into the good books of the Maharani and the Maharaja. The Maharaja was due to become a major only at the age of 21. He manipulated the Viceroy. Yes, he got his majority. He was made a major 2 years early. And this had a huge implication on Travancore because till then the elder Maharani, Maharani, she was a regent and she was a fairly decent person. And the younger Maharani took over because her son had become the Maharaja. So based on that. And then, the whole thing started.
What happened was that Lord Willingdon, when he was governor of Madras presidency, Sir CP and he became very close.
Lord Wellington, more Lady Wellington. I'm told the relationship was much stronger with Lady Wellington. In fact, I think in the Ivory Throne, Manu Pillai mentions that also. He was very good at manipulating ladies.
And then what happened was Lord Willingdon went to Canada as Governor General and then came back as Viceroy in India. And Sir CP was able to use his influence with Willingdons, let's put it, husband and wife, and was able to
get the Maharaja.
Get the Maharaja installed as Maharaja about a year before he was actually
supposed
to. After that, in fact, the Regent Maharani was treated very, very badly.
Lakshmi Bai.
Yeah, she was given just 75,000 rupees as pension. It should have been at least double that. And she was entitled to a 21-gun salute. That was taken away. And she was treated as,
And the whole family.
And the whole family is suffering. Off to Bangalore. She just moved to Bangalore.
And the rightful heir now
didn't ever come back.
No, because the rightful heir is now in Bangalore, not here. The Maharaja should, because it's obvious, the eldest. So they probably threw her out. They stay in, I think, somewhere in Curzon Road or something. I want to actually visit one day and find out. They were in a bungalow there, dispossessed totally. She was a very fine person. She, brought up trade and other things in a big way. Unfortunately, this Parvati Bai was a different sort altogether. Lakshmi Bai was different.
No, that's okay. They're just asking.
Anybody else has any questions?
No, another small thing is the judge who sat was a guy called Kukulia from Bangalore.
Yes.
Many years later, I came across the Kukulia family. They were owning huge estates which were confiscated and given to them. The judge who presided was given estates.
He became Chief Justice, I think.
He became Chief Justice. Yeah. I knew his children. I knew his sons and grandsons pretty well. And I used to think, my God, this guy is sitting there only because he did all these things.
Okay, any other questions?
It's interesting. It's good that you wrote the book. Good that you wrote the book.
I just wanted to ask, what made you think of this title?
Beg your pardon?
What made you think of this title? No, I'm asking Thomas.
Yeah.
Actually, that was mentioned in the video, but because of the terrible audio, it didn't come through. So Thomo will explain it again. Thomo, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. So any more questions from anyone?
The question was that why this title?
Why the title? I think I tried, it was not very clear in my response to Liz. See, the scepter is a symbol of power, and it was wielded by Sir CP Ramaswami, not the Maharaja, because whatever he wanted done was done. And he, in fact, in the early days, he treated the Maharaja like a errant schoolboy, But he is not the one to wield the scepter. So it's shrouded because the scepter is there, but shrouded. That's why I thought it was a good title to give it, and quite a few people have appreciated that.
One lady was asking this question.
Okay.
Yeah, my name is Mathai John. I'm great grandson of K.C. Ipen. So right from my childhood, I had only two questions. One was why such a bank, which my great grandfather was the managing director, could collapse, and that I hope to read your book to find out the answer. And second thing is the untold story of the suffering the family went through. My grandmother was the eldest daughter, and the kind of trauma that K.C. Ipen faced is an untold story that many of you haven't heard. So at least so nice to hear that Mr. Thomas has brought out such a book. You're opening out a topic that is very important to all of us. Thank you.
See, I tried to give it it's not a historical tome in the usual sense, I've tried to, as Liz mentioned, make it more on the lines of a story, a novel. So hopefully you will find it interesting to read, not just for the information that you provided.
Looking forward to read it.
One thing I'd like to mention, which is covered in the book. See, the two banks were merged in October 1937. Their first set of accounts was from October to 31st December 1937. So the earliest date on which the accounts would have been available, audit and everything, by mid February, say. And then the usual 23 days notice and all that. So it couldn't have been, the annual general meeting could not have been held till March. I'm sure it couldn't have been earlier than March. I was not able to find the date of the AGM. But even before the accounts were distributed, all these claims about not providing adequate provision for doubtful debts, all that, and that the bank was taking out money from Tamil Nadu and taking it to Kerala. And the first run on the banks were all in the Madras bank branches. They didn't have any runs in Kerala or Travancore. So it's clear that there is something more than just, this one issue. And somebody was behind it. Somebody had spent a lot of money to have the run on the bank. And they went to the extent, even to the extent, although the first court actually exonerated them, they went on appeal. Travancore government went on appeal and got them. CP Martin took the case right up to the Privy Council in London. But they finally, after I think 4 or 5 months, they decided they can't interfere with a sovereign state. Travancore is a sovereign state. They cannot interfere. That was the ruling from the Privy Council in London.
Yeah.
So everything was tried, but Sir CP prevailed. But it didn't get him anything, because at the end of it all, he lost out completely. He should have been representing India at the UN over the Kashmir issue. And we would have done much better than, because CP had this ability to wine and dine, and all that is very important in the scene. This Iyengar, who was sent to represent India, was a teetotaler, vegetarian, and how does somebody like that entertain Western diplomats? So, and he got nothing except vice chancellorship of BHU and I think Annamalai University. That was all he was able to do. Whereas CP Martin, won the elections to the Lok Sabha by probably the highest margin at that time, served his full term as MP, and then he was appointed ambassador to
Sudan,
Somalia. So there you have it. Sir CP went on to do nothing much in his retired life, whereas CP Martin actually became more famous all over the country because of this.
I don't know. I would like to disagree on one point. CP made a lot of money. If you go to Chennai, you can see CP Ramaswamy Road, where he owns much of the property there.
No, that property, which is a very large, the Grove.
Yes. So because I have gone down that road, and much of it is.
No, that was not made by CP Ramaswamy. It was made by his father and his grandfather. That's a very old property. But he had. It's a very old property. I have gone to the background of that. So that's.
It was bought in the 1920s and 1930s. His son became a minister. C.R. Pattabhiraman became a union minister in the Indian cabinet. He was able to manipulate things. He continued to manipulate.
See,
so it's not as if he was
he had a lot of influence, but he himself could not go to the heights that he should have gone, because he was a brilliant man. There's no denying that. The man was brilliant, but he had that.
Not in a democracy. Not in a democracy. He wouldn't have succeeded because he was highly unpopular. He was.
No, but you see, the thing is, if he had played his cards right, he could have.
He could not have won. He could never have won an election from anywhere.
No, election, but most of the people
like CP Martin, unlike CP Martin, he could never have won an election.
No, he could not have, but won an election. But a lot of people like John Mathai and all that became ministers without winning elections. So at that time, Nehru would have appointed somebody, and Nehru and Ramaswamy Aiyar were very, very close. Ramaswamy Aiyar stayed with Nehru in his Allahabad house, Anand Bhavan, several times. But they fell out because he joined the Viceroy's Council, and then he was a secretary of the joint secretary along with Nehru of the Congress. So if he had stayed that course, he would have become definitely a senior minister in the Indian government. He wouldn't have to win elections, but he would have got it, because Pandit Nehru and he were very close, and Nehru would have just put him onto the cabinet. But he was so angry with him that in his book he has written very disparagingly about Sir CP Ramaswamy.
He was an evil man. Definitely he was an evil man.
He was evil, no doubt.
And one amazing thing is about the freedom struggle is, it went on in two phases. At the center, he could play the congressman. In the state, he was the oppressor. The kingdoms are very badly governed. The 562 kingdoms of India were very badly governed. And Travancore was one of the worst. One of the worst. So you could play a double role. He could be a Machiavellian role in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He would be Dr. Jekyll there and come and here and become Mr. Hyde.
Any more questions?
I think somebody had a question as to where they could get the book from, like where they could buy the book.
Well, yeah, the book is available. See, it's very difficult to distribute books in India. Even distributors, Kerala-based distributors, I went to them. They say, we love to distribute a book, but we can't because we are distributing HarperCollins and others, and they will not allow us to. So as I put it up here, the Shrouded Sceptre is available. The agency stores, they were very good. They got 24 bookshops all over Kerala, and they have taken 150 copies of my book. So you can pick it up from there, or you can order it through Panthera Imprint or pulithara@gmail.com and contact me on this number, which I've provided. So I've already got, people just got to know about it, and quite a few have already written asking for one. Somebody traced my name without even having a clue. Another one of Casey Eapen's great-grandsons, Anil Joshi. He came and bought 2 books, came to my house. He knows me personally, so he came and picked it up a few days ago.
1750.
May I suggest you're trying Amazon? Because I sold a lot of my books through Amazon. I published a book a couple of years ago. It sold heavily through Amazon.
Tomo, can you unmute yourself?
Tomo, you're muted. But don't they insist on a minimum?
Not really. I don't know, because they came to me actually.
Huh.
Maybe you could try directly.
Yeah, I will. There's another option. Anyway, in some time, I will be bringing this out as an ebook. And also, I've asked a good translator to translate it into Malayalam. So that will come out maybe later this year, hopefully.
That's a good idea.
Tomo, keep a few in Rivera Sweets. We'll walk across and pick it up. Yeah. I will.
Okay. Tomo, you want to say anything before we close, or unless there are any more questions?
Well, before you close, all I would, in case those closes before I get a chance to speak. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you.
I think that we got over 70, I think. When I last saw, there were over 72 participants. Very good. Thank you so much.
Didn't drop off in spite of the bad video. Okay, so that's the credit to your.
I don't know what happened. It was quite okay when we viewed it first, but came out quite badly.
I think the connectivity was poor while you were transmitting.
I think
that's why it kept that black screen coming in.
Yeah.
The audio was not clear.
Actually, the black screen comes when I'm trying to mute people and the window comes up. That particular area becomes black on the screen. My sister mute people, so it kept coming and going. Anyway, so when we do we will be
Thomas, this is Sid.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Thomas, this is Sid. I think your talk was recorded. Can you also send the link to the record?
Yeah, we'll do that. We'll put it on YouTube and we'll send that link to all those who have invited for this.
Okay.
Give us a day and we'll put it on the YouTube, including the questions that were asked here. But that video itself, we will try and improve the audio quality so that I'm not even sure why it was staggering on the thing. It should not have happened, but
because it wasn't staggering when we viewed it.
I know. Yeah. Anyway.
Transmission was
All right.
Anyway.
Thank you so much.
Behind us now.
Okay. Take care and God bless.
Thank
and
you.
I hope you noted down. I hope you noted
Thank you, Tomo.
Thank you, Tomo.
Bye.
Bye.
Tomo, you deserve a weekend drink.
Now we are almost neighbors, so goodbye.
Bye, Thomas.
Bye, bye.
Bye, Thomas and
Bye.
At least one more for the book.
Yes.
Thomas Chacko, I think now we can expect you in the Wednesday club meeting.
Yeah, continue.
We can expect
in the Wednesday club meeting.
Attendance. Now you cannot, excuse yourself.
Tell the excuse that you are writing a book.
Now is getting it translated.